Wow, we have a lot of new gear coming out this patch. In addition to a new pair of artifact sets, signature weapons, and our usual craftables, we also now have a new set of Battle Pass weapons coming out. This is a total of 12 weapons and 2 artifact sets, and this is way too much for me to cover in one video. So, for this patch's weapon and artifact video, I'm splitting it into a two-parter. This first video is going to cover the free-to-play gear with the artifacts and craftables. Then, I'll have another video posted where I'll cover the Battle Pass and gacha weapons. As usual, I'm going to explain what everything does and who can use them in both optimal and niche scenarios. Additional info is down below, and captions are available if you need them. Without further ado, let's get started. Both artifact sets will be tailored towards the new Stellar Reaction system. The first set is called Scarlet Proof. Its 2-piece effect increases attack by 18%, and its 4-piece effect will increase the user's crit rate by 16%, and Stellar-Swirl damage by 40% for 10 seconds after triggering a Stellar-Swirl reaction. This artifact set is a bit weird in terms of its design. Unlike the Stellar Conduct set, which is perfectly usable on both Cryo and Electro units, this Stellar-Swirl set is only usable on Anemo characters. The effects proc when triggering this reaction, but swirls can only trigger upon Anemo application. Characters such as Sandrone, Odette, and Cryo MC have ways to deal direct Stellar-Swirl damage, but since these units are Cryo, they can't use the set's effects. This is less important for Odette and Cryo MC since they'll likely use a different set that we'll cover later. But for Sandrone, if you want to use her as a Stellar-Swirl DPS, you can't even use the dedicated Swirl set. So her best artifact in this team is just anything that can stack a bunch of attack stats. I also mentioned how cool it would have been if other Cryo characters got some changes to make them work as Stellar-Swirl DPSs, but based on what this artifact is providing, they would also be unable to use the set. If they do bait and switch us at the last minute and make direct damage a trigger effect, that would be a massive buff for the Cryo characters. But let's segue into the Anemo characters. Because of its trigger limits, it's possible the devs are taking Stellar-Swirl in an Anemo-centric direction, as opposed to them having a mixture with Cryo. Mizuki is currently the only Stellar-Swirl unit we have, and this set can be really good on her. Main thing is, her stat for damage is EM, which kinda goes against the attack bonus, and the other factor is that she has great synergy with VV, which was also changed to grant a Stellar-Swirl bonus. While she's able to use the new Stellar-Swirl set, it's probably best to keep her on that VV EM build. As of right now, we don't have any other Anemo characters who make use of the set, but we can make some predictions based on this information. We know that Vesna's gonna be a Stellar-Swirl unit because of her Anemo linchpin in the teaser. It's almost certain she'll be a DPS for the team, so this set will work on her. Considering that the artifact set provides an attack bonus, I'm also assuming she will be an attack scaler as opposed to EM. We're also getting rumors that Wanderer, Xiao, and Jean might be receiving Stellar-Swirl buffs in the future. This actually lines up pretty well with the artifact set, since all of these characters are attack scaling. And then, in a more niche scenario, you can run this on other Anemo supports in a Stellar-Swirl team. Let's say you bring Sucrose in a team with Mizuki, and for some reason you decide Mizuki is going to be the VV holder. You can't have Sucrose on VV as well, so one of the alternatives is this new set. Stellar-Swirl is not limited to direct damage, it's also something that uses the reaction contribution system as a normal reaction damage form. Sucrose being EM scaling gives her a pretty nice base damage for the reaction. Then combined with the 40% Stellar-Swirl and 16% crit rate, this will contribute more damage from her. But as of right now, the set isn't something I'd farm unless you're for sure going for Vesna. And since the rumored Anemo character buffs are still rumors, I don't think you should pre-farm for them until we get the confirmed list. But while the Stellar-Swirl set might not be on our radar just yet, the other artifact set probably is. Heart of the Furnace grants an 18% attack bonus as its 2-piece. For its 4-piece, triggering a stellar reaction or dealing direct Stellar-Swirl damage, increases the user's attack by 12%, and the entire team's stellar reaction damage by 50%. This lasts for 12 seconds, it can trigger off-field, but it can't stack with multiple copies of the set. This artifact provides a really high amount of damage for the team, and its trigger effects are much more flexible as opposed to the Stellar-Swirl set. Because of this, the list of viable users is much longer, so I'm going to split this into Cryo, Electro, and Animo units. Starting with Cryo, the best clear users are Odette and Cryo MC. Both of them can deal direct Stellar-Swirl damage of both the Conduct and Swirl types, so even if you can't trigger an actual reaction with them, they're still able to proc the effect. Another unit you might consider is Chi-Chi, but she's in a weird position where it only works in Stellar Conduct. I mentioned this in my analysis on Stellar Reactions. Chi-Chi got changes that allow her to buff Stellar-Swirl in addition to Stellar Conduct, but she never got a change that allows her to deal direct Stellar-Swirl damage. Because of the Swirl trigger conditions, she also can't trigger a reaction form of Stellar-Swirl, so basically, she has no way to proc the buff for the team. Other Cryo units are in the same boat of only being able to buff Stellar Conduct. Diona is the other Cryo support who got Stellar buffs, but she's limited to triggering a reaction since there's no direct damage from her. Because of this, she can only use the set if you have an underlying Electro Aura instead of Cryo. This can still be used for other Cryo units in general, and the same Electro Aura logic applies. You could run this on characters like Layla or Scarlet if you want, and it'll work the same way. For Electro characters, Yai would be a strong off-fielder for the set, but her being a damage dealer pushes her more towards the Stellar Conduct damage set. Beidou is in the same boat as Diona, where she got Stellar buffs, but she can't deal Stellar damage. She can use the set, but she just needs an underlying Cryo Aura to apply Electro on. Alyosha is a new Electro character who will also be a nice Stellar Conduct support. As a 4-star, he can't deal direct damage, so he's just like Beidou in his trigger conditions. For non-stellar units, Kuki and Dori come to mind as a couple options due to their slower application rate. But if you can apply a crazy amount of Cryo, even someone like Fischl should be able to proc this effect. And finally, we have Animo units in Stellar-Swirl. I still think Mizuki on VV is the better choice for an artifact build, so while you can use this on her, you might not decide to put this set on her. We don't have other Animo units with direct Stellar-Swirl, but that's not really an issue in terms of triggering the effect. Unlike Superconduct, where an aura actually affects how easily you trigger the reaction, Animo units have no aura issues when triggering Swirl. If your Animo DPS has the Stellar-Swirl damage set, and none of your Cryo units are capable of dealing direct Stellar-Swirl damage, then you could slot this on your Animo support for the bonuses. Overall, the possible users on this list are really expansive, and as more stellar characters and buffs get released, that list will just keep getting bigger. Now that we've finished the new artifact sets, let's move into the craftable weapons. Starting off is our sword, Emberwell. It has a 510 base attack and a 165 EM substat. If the user triggers a reaction, their attack is increased by 16 to 32% for 12 seconds. If they trigger a stellar reaction, their stellar damage is increased by 16 to 32% for 12 seconds. Both effects can occur while off-field. Since the stellar effect is reliant on triggering a stellar reaction, I broke the user list down to people who can use the full effect, and those who can only make use of the attack and EM stats. For the full effect, Odette and CryoMC will be the best users. They can deal direct stellar damage with their kits, and this damage is attack scaling. Since stellar damage is a reaction damage type, EM will also contribute to its value. With that being said, the sword is reliant on triggering a stellar reaction, not from dealing direct damage. If you run them in a team where it's hard or impossible to trigger a reaction, the sword just becomes a standard attack and EM stat stick. In terms of another stellar user, this one is more of a visual speculation. In this picture of the Transcendence trailer, we can see the other Druzhna are holding swords, so it's also likely Vesna could be a sword user. And if she is a sword user, she's also a strong contender for this weapon. On top of that, she'll have no problem triggering Stellar-Swirl, so the full effect would be obtainable. I also want to bring in any other Anemo Sword user as potential niche options. Since Stellar-Swirl can have a regular damage form, these Anemo units can both trigger and contribute to that Stellar-Swirl damage. Moving into other users for just the attack and EM stats, I think the best options would be units who specialize in Melt, Vape, or Quicken. These are the reactions where the stats tend to dual scale into personal damage, as opposed to transformative reactions that technically split scale into different damage forms. For Pyro, Melt, and Vape, Durin is kind of the only option. For Cryo Melt, I think Kai is the only choice here, because the other DPSs there are Freeze or Stellar Conduct oriented. For Quicken teams, this'll work on Pleuran, Kuching, Alhaitham, and Dendro/Electro MC. The next weapon is the Claymore, Blade of Atonement. It has practically the same trigger effects as the sword, but with different stats. It has a 565 base attack and a 27.6% attack substat. Triggering a reaction increases EM by 64 to 128 for 12 seconds, and stellar reaction triggers increase attack by 16 to 32% for 12 seconds. It's also off-field friendly. Unlike the sword, which grants a mixture of different bonuses, this Claymore grants up to 59.6% attack and 128 EM. In the same vein as the sword, I focused on stellar units, then attack/EM scaling units. For stellar DPSs, Sandrone is currently the only one who specializes in that. To get the full effect, she would require an Electro Aura to proc the effect, but it is doable in those teams. It is not doable in Stellar-Swirl, unfortunately. Beidou is someone who works really well in Stellar, so she can proc the effect and get a really high attack bonus. But since Stellar Conduct doesn't have a regular reaction damage form, and Beidou doesn't have stellar damage, she doesn't really use the EM in this weapon. I'm still holding out hope that we get that Dendro Cryo Rhymegrass archetype, and that it would be flexible with mixing other elements such as Electro. So if you did Beidou's Stellar Conduct with Dendro, her Electro hits could trigger Quicken, which would make dual use of the attack and EM. And then Sayu actually has direct attack and EM dual scaling in her burst damage and healing. She's also an Anemo character, which means she can trigger Stellar-Swirl no problem. I'm still holding out hope she gets a buff for Stellar, but even without one, she can use the Claymore's full effects in a Stellar team. And while Varka doesn't have dual scaling for attack and EM, him being an Anemo user allows him to trigger Stellar-Swirl easily, so he can get the full attack bonus. For other users, you're stuck with the base attack substat and EM. For Pyro Melt or Vape, Mawika and Diluc should be able to proc the effect for their usual teams. And finally, Chongyun in a reverse melt team can work. Next up is thankfully the last of the same effect batch, with the Catalyst, Echoes of the Heart. It has a 565 base attack and a 27.6% attack substat. Triggering a reaction increases EM by 60 to 120 for 12 seconds. Triggering a stellar reaction increases stellar damage by 16 to 32% for 12 seconds. Just like the others, it's off-field friendly. For stellar units, Yai and wriothesley are currently the best options since they can use all of these stats for their damage. For both units, they just need the opposing elemental aura to trigger the effects. Mizuki is close behind as another user, mainly using the EM and stellar damage bonuses, not the attack substat. In terms of who just uses the attack and EM, Yanfei and Klee can work in Vape, but in Klee's case, that's heavily dependent on if she's even the one vaping. Anemo characters like Lanyan, Heizo, Aoife, and Sucrose can be good options for driving swirls. Additionally, since Stellar-Swirl has a regular reaction form, the damage bonus there is usable even if none of them are stellar buffed. Next up is the Polearm, Song of the Vigil. It has a 565 base attack and a 110 EM substat. Triggering an elemental reaction regenerates 4 to 8 energy for the user, and this can occur once every 9 seconds. Meanwhile, triggering a stellar reaction increases attack by 20 to 40% for 12 seconds. and once again, off-field friendly. Cyno's the only Polearm user who was Stellar buffed, so he has access to the full effects. His new buffs allow him to enter the burst state just by casting his skill, and this can make the energy passive less valuable in some cases. But if you are looking to maximize his damage, using his burst gives him better uptime on his Stellar Conduct hits. Alyosha is also a unit with Stellar Conduct synergy. He's in the same position as Beidou. While he can use the attack and energy passives, he doesn't have access to Stellar Conduct damage, so the EM substat is useless on him. In the same scenario, you could do a Dendro unit for a Quicken Conduct mixture, and then he would make use of the EM stat. In terms of other users who can only use the EM and energy effects, this can work on Xiangling or Hu Tao in Reverse Vape as an alternate stat stick. Rosaria in Reverse Meld also has the same effects. Toma in a Burgeon team works, especially since he does have high ER needs, and Raiden Hyperbloom can also use this in the same way Toma does, but since her Hyperbloom playstyle is just a skill bot, she actually doesn't need the energy. This last one is really niche and probably not meta, but I think it's kind of funny. If you placed a Cryo Stellar Enabler in a Lunar Charge team, you could give Flynn's and Inefa a way to trigger Stellar Conduct and grant them the attack bonus on top of the other two effects. Specifically for Inefa, you have room to run an on-fielder, so you can run Sandrone as an on-fielder, plop in Columbina, and now you have a possibly functional Lunar Stellar Senbina Yuri team. Last of our craftables is the bow, Covenant of Frost and Snow. This weapon has a 510 base attack, a 51.7% defense bonus, and when the user casts their skill, they get a 120 to 240 EM bonus for 12 seconds. This is a really complicated weapon, and there are so many characters who can use it. Linnea is going to be the first option as a Lunar Crystallized unit, since she specializes in both defense and EM scaling. The second option is really niche, but if you have Goro built with enough ER to use his burst, and you don't need the extra particles from Favbo, and you're running a Lunar Crystallized team where Goro can contribute reaction damage, then this is a really solid option. As for other potential users... Let's move into the final weapon, which is technically going to be a free 5-star weapon. Because it's free, I'm just gonna read the R5 description, since everyone will be refining this. On that note, this weapon's refinements are unlocked when you visit new Statue of the Sevens in Snezhnaya, and I think as of 7.0, we're only getting to R2 or R3. Exaiphanes' blade will have a 608 base attack and a 33.1% crit rate substat. When the Traveler equips this weapon, they gain a 6% crit damage bonus for every element they resonated with. With 7 elements, this is 42% crit damage. Their attack will increase by 40% for 8 seconds after hitting an opponent. Doing this also regenerates 5 energy, and this can occur once every 5 seconds. It can also trigger while off-field. Traveler essentially got a crazy upscale with this weapon. 33% crit rate, 42% crit damage, 40% attack, and roughly 15 to 20 energy every rotation, depending on how frequently you can trigger that effect. But because it's a Traveler-only weapon, I can't really do the niche scenario bit here. It'll just be a general stat stick for literally everyone else. And that is actually everything there is for this video. If you enjoyed, consider leaving a like and subscribe to support the channel. If you're planning to go for these weapons or artifacts, let me know in the comments who you might plan to build them on, and depending on when you're watching this, be on the lookout for the other part of this video, where I'll be covering the Odette signature weapon and the new Battle Pass weapons. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye!